Hi, everyone. My name is Anwar Sherif. I currently work at Southwest, and I am a leader and architect in the space of automation and testing. So before I get into that, if you don't have a problem that Autumn described in terms of test data, it means you're not testing well or enough. So once you start testing really good, then you'll start seeing problem with your test data. So let's look at this fictitious application to get us started. It's a small thermostat that controls temperature in a given house, let's say, right? It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 zones: office, bedroom 1, 2, living room, and so forth. And let's say you can set the temperature medium, low, and high. And then let's say you can deploy this application on 2 operating systems, Mac or Windows. And then you got 4 different browsers. So you have parameter for browsers, parameter for OS, you have parameter for temperature setting, and then you have a parameter for the zones. And then you got parameter values for each. Let's say you got 3 temperature settings, those are the values, okay? Now, in order to test this application really, really well, what do you need? You need 4 browsers, 2 OS, temperature 3. Okay, so you start multiplying these, and you get 96 combinations. Out of that, you start weeding out the combinations that are not valid. Let's say Explorer or Edge does not run on Mac OS, so that's invalid scenario. You take that out, right? So you end up with, let's say, about 48 test cases. So with these 48 test cases, you can answer all the questions that you can that can come up in terms of this application. Meaning, can you set high temperature for bedroom 1? The answer would be yes, right? In fact, you can. So that's a two-way or pairwise kind of interaction. But you can go beyond that. Can you use Chrome high bedroom 1? The answer would be yes. So you've exhaustively tested that, okay? So 48 test cases for this, pretty simple application. The problem is when you get into real applications that we all use, now things go crazy. Look at this one application. If you go to ARD, by the way, there are sample applications or models, and there is one for e-commerce. If you generate full test cases, full coverage for that, you get 64,000 test cases, right? In my experience, I looked at how many ways can you book an airline ticket, right? When you look at round trip, stop, non-stop, forms of payments, types of passengers, number of passengers, you go down the list. At the end, guess how many test cases I got? 150 million. Okay?
Is that all?
So there is no way you can test 100 or execute 150 million or even 64,000 test cases, right? So the question becomes, how many test cases should I execute, and which one of those? How do I pick? Okay, so that's the problem that we're having. So if you're, okay, we'll get into that. So luckily, there is a lot of research in terms of what's the best way to catch a defect from a software. Lots of universities, including like Department of Defense, and right, it's important. If you're launching a missile, you want to hit the target, right? You don't want to. So testing is important. So there's a lot of research, and model-based testing is one of the practical ways of actually testing. There are many theoretical ones that are probably difficult to implement, but in this case, model-based testing, and there are other forms, basically, combinatorial testing, orthogonal array testing. It's kind of referred to it in different ways, but let's just say model-based testing in this case is one of the really practical ways of testing. And there is empirical evidence on what's the best way to catch defects, and this is essentially one of them, okay? So what happens is you create a model of your application, and you can create a model in different forms. We'll get into that in a minute. And then algorithms take over after that. They generate highly effective test cases to give you optimal coverage with least number of test cases, basically. So remember, we're looking at 64,000 test cases, but how do you optimize so that you can cover a lot with the least number of test cases? Okay, so how is it different from traditional way of testing? So on the left side, or is it right? Yeah, okay. On the other side, you have the traditional way of legacy, what I call the way of testing, right? Somebody writes test case, and then toss it over to folks who can automate that, and then typically you run it sequentially. So that is the legacy way. So the model-based testing way is you build a model of your application, and you hand it over to these tools. They generate highly effective test cases. And if you know what you're doing, you can execute those in parallel so that you can get your results much faster. So, comparison with these two, it's really like an accounting firm that still does accounting by hand compared to spreadsheets and so forth. This is really like the difference. I mean, in today's age, nobody would do that, right? So we shouldn't do that with testing either. All right, so the result would be, much better test cases, as you can see here. So what's the big deal? Number one, faster automation. This is real data. A project that would have taken us 92 weeks was done in 6 weeks. And I'll go into the reason why you could do stuff faster, right? So faster automation, better test coverage, as I mentioned earlier. Basically, it's really almost next to impossible to juggle like 15, 30 parameters in your head and come up with really good test cases. It's impossible. So in this case, algorithms do it, and they do it well, right? And then you can cover you can generate or tailor your coverage based on your testing need, right? You can scale it vertically as well as horizontally, as I would refer to it, meaning if you have a bunch of microservices, you can do your component testing, right? And then you can do integration, and then you can do end-to-end within that same model. Also, within a click of a button, you can generate, let's say you just want to do sanity testing or smoke or regression. You can scale it basically pretty quickly within that same model. So that's what I refer to as better test coverage. And then last, additional benefits. It greatly reduces the time and effort to review test cases, right? And also maintenance. Something changes in the applications. Now you don't have to go and sift through hundreds of test cases to figure out which ones are still valid and which ones are not. So all of that stuff is taken care of. Also, models can be a form of documentation, basically, especially depending on who creates it. Let's say business owners who knows the flow or the business scenarios, if they build it, and that becomes a form of communication actually within the organization, basically. This is exactly how it should work. Developers and testers can take that and do what they need to do with it. Okay? Any questions, by the way, so far? No? Okay. So earlier I said it's faster automation. It took us about 6 weeks, something that would have taken us 92 weeks. Why? Here is the reason. So the traditional way, you write test cases. Let's say I have 1,000 test cases. Now I'm going to go and automate one by one those test cases. But when you come to model-based testing, that application may have 20 or 30 small blocks like that say, click on this button or delete data or, right, create this and that. So you have maybe 20 or 30 building blocks. So that's all you're automating instead of thousands of test cases one by one. So this is one of the reasons it's much faster in terms of creating your automation. And then maintenance, right? Something changes, you will go and change your model. You're not going to look at 1,000 test cases and trying to go back and edit and fix those. So these are the reasons why, some of the reasons why it's much faster. And then if you're automating, you can use any language, Java, whatever. And also, styles or types of automation, right? Some people do BDD, behavioral driven, and all sorts of stuff. So none of that really matters. All that can be plugged into this and be used. And then you're also not locked into a specific tool or this methodology, right? You can take it away and you can go back to your old ways. So there is nothing that locks you down, meaning if I don't have this tool tomorrow, what happens to all my test cases or all my automation? You don't have those concerns either. Okay? All right, so we looked at why it's faster to automate. Let's look at why you get a better test coverage. As I mentioned earlier as well, so you can dynamically change your coverage, meaning if you want exhaustively test every possible combination, you can do that. Or if you want to do something like a smaller sanity or smoke test cases, within a click of a button, that gets generated. If you already have automated your building blocks, now you got automated test cases. What this means is when you plug into your CI/CD, right, you have test cases that are readily available to be executed instead of waiting weeks or months to start developing your test cases. Okay. Again, change into application, tool like ARD takes care of that. Once you change the flow of a model, it will actually flag what changed in terms of test cases that are not valid, additions, and test cases that need change as well. All of that will be flagged and taken care of automatically. And also, the last piece I like, because typically leadership asks you, so how is our testing, right? Typically you give a subjective answer, meaning I feel good about it based on my experience, right? And then my colleague might say something different. But in this case, you actually have objective, something that you can say, all right, this model or this application does 100 things, and we are covering 80 of them. And somebody might say, well, why are you covering 80? Why not 90? Well, how much time do I have to test so I can click a button and generate the rest, get you to that desired level. So testing is always what? It's a balance between how much risk you can tolerate and how much resources you can invest in it, right? So this gives you a precise language to kind of negotiate that and determine how much you want to invest in your testing. Okay. So, all right, I said it gives you better test coverage, right? Let me show you what it does. So on the other side, exam test cases, this is one application that had 400 test cases that were written manually and automated, right? And what I did is I parameterized them and plugged them into a tool that actually measures your coverage, right? And it spits out different levels. Okay, this is percentage of what coverage you have for different levels of coverage. And then on the right side, I went ahead and generated new test cases based on this model-based testing, okay? So what I found out is that those 400 test cases were doing the equivalent of 32 test cases, right? So that's all I needed to do the same amount of work. So, and this is, by the way, this is typical. There is lots of data if you in the Google combinatorial testing that you can see stuff that was generated manually versus with these types of tool, you will get like 3-4 times more. Because, like I said, in our minds, there is no way we could juggle, 10 parameters and figure out, optimize them. You're literally thinking about 1 or 2 things as you write test cases. So that's what it is. And in this case, by the way, I had more data, but which I did not include. Let's say I wanted to, right? This is basically number of test cases, and this is the percentage of coverage that you have, right? So 400 test cases were covering 71% of the pairwise or two-way testing. If I wanted to do 100%, I would probably need somewhere around 100 test cases, right? So still way less than the 400 test cases, but you're doing a lot more with that. Okay. All right. So far I kind of focused on the methodology, not ARD, right? So then if you would like to implement this type of methodology, right? So what should you be looking for? Which, by the way, ARD has all of this and meets these, right? So one of the biggest challenges in model-based testing is the modeling. You can model in many different ways, right? You can even have a spreadsheet with parameters and their values. You can have user stories that you can start with. There are many ways of modeling, right? And one of the really, really challenging things is for people to visualize what they're testing and the model kind of, pairing those two. Luckily, with the ARD, you got many options, and one of the simplest and the easiest one is this Visio looking diagram based model, where it's like a kind of pseudo programming language, right? Login, right? You got 3 options. You got decision table, right? It's fairly easy to build a model, and that's the easiest one that I found. So you should be looking at the modeling techniques, and then the next thing is the algorithm. Okay, what kind of test cases do they generate, right? If you have really, really long or list of parameters, can this tool handle to generate optimum or optimized test cases based on those? So that is another thing. Typically, a lot of tools, they're okay with that, right? And the last one is also really, really important. I mean, we talked about DevOps, right? All of this has to fit into your existing process. Otherwise, it breaks basically the process, right? So whether you're talking about your IDE or repository or test data, this also works really well with your test data manager. And it has to fit into your existing process and also tools. And all of these criteria are met really, really well with ARD. And another thing that I really like, I mean, we didn't talk about the advanced level stuff, but about ARD is it has plugins. Initially, when I heard it has plugins, I thought it was this closed binary type of plugins that Broadcom provides, but really they're just scripts, Python kind of basic scripts. So with that, you can integrate this into infinite number of things that you can imagine, in case if there is nothing that is hindering you from kind of plugging this into your process or tools. So in a nutshell, look for a good technique to model that is easily understood by a lot of people, right? And you're talking about business owners, scrum masters, tech leads, right? The whole crew needs to understand the model quickly. And then obviously you need to be able to generate good test cases. And also you don't want to break your existing process or method of your whole development and testing. So that needs to be taken care of.